Hey everyone, now that we have all of the cards for the expansion, it's time to get to some theory crafting. So I will be doing one video for each class and featuring a deck of my theory crafting plus one of a community member's. So thank you to those who submitted a deck via the Google form. So let's check out my Death Knight deck here. This direction that I went for this one was actually focused on Deathrattle, because some of the new cards here in the expansion, I mean, Cagehead, just a really fun card, but also just the synergy of maybe giving a Deathrattle minion Reborn with Mosh Pit, and also the new minion of Bone Shredder using corpses to trigger and then gain the Deathrattle, as well as the new spell Death Growl. This all feels like a really cool Deathrattle package to me. And there's a couple of different things when I built this deck. So for one, I wanted to focus on the Deathrattles. You can see the curve here. No 6s, a couple of higher cost 7 and plus. But mostly it's a lower-ish curve. But it's not an aggressive deck necessarily. So it doesn't have as many bodies as maybe Unholy Aggro Death Knight does. But also one thing with trying to get these Death Rattles and really synergizing, using the Bone Shredders again to trigger and gain the Death Rattle of a friendly minion that had died, you can't really go for some of the same things as the more aggressive Unholy deck has. So forget that. We can't put some of that stuff in, like the Rancher, giving minions that you play a Death Rattle of the summoning a 1/1. Don't want to do that, right? I don't want that to be the Bone Shredder Death Rattle. So I couldn't really include any of that kind of stuff. So instead of going more bodies and grave strength, I went more of a naval mine direction. So the big death rattles that I'm going to aim for with this deck are the naval mines of dealing 4 damage to the enemy hero, and the Brittleskin zombie of if the Brittleskin zombie dies and it's your opponent's turn, you deal 3 damage to them. So this deck is, instead of being more aggressive, it's focused on dealing some direct damage to their face with death rattle effects. So that's kind of the aim. Cagehead, the new legendary, does have this death rattle of summoning a 9/9 boar with charge and taunt. Although this one I think might be a little bit harder to actually get out onto the board. Honestly, this card, you might have to go in more of a very specified direction, rather than just kind of including it in here like I did. So I think if I were to get rid of something, maybe this doesn't really have the effect that I'm looking for when I go to try to play it, this is probably the card that I would take out first, and then maybe just put in 1 copy of Grave Strength if I end up having board. But the focus is going to be on still some early and mid-game boards, with things like the school teachers, killing stuff off for Famished Fool. You still, of course, have the Construct Quarter. I mean, I don't know why the Construct Quarter looks all cut off like this, but Construct Quarter is so strong still. Even at, it's actually 4 mana, the image is showing it as 3, but it is 4 mana after the nerf. But even at 4 mana, it's still so powerful. So using the Construct Quarter to kill stuff off. Also, the Bone Shredder, you do need 5 corpses. So it's very similar in a way to the Grave Strength, where you still do need to make sure that you're generating corpses to be able to use that effect. So I definitely wanted to make sure that there was enough stuff in the deck that you could have the corpses available. Plus, topping out at this Marrow Guard just for a big board refill. This is a battle cry. They all just are bodies that have rush and stats attached to them. There's no death rattle stuff. Maybe you're in a game where you are generating some corpses, but you're not really finding the things for the death rattle synergies. Maybe you can top out at Marrowgar. This as well. These top 2 end the game legendaries might be the first things to go in this deck, but I like the idea of focusing on the Naval Mine and Brittleskin Zombie death rattles and trying to repeat those. Even with the Death Growl, giving those effects to minions next to you works really well with the hero power for one thing as well. So that seems pretty good. And then again, that Bone Shredder being able to like repeat that. Now with Naval Mine being a mech, and this year we have magnetic stuff coming back, I also thought, why not put a couple of magnetic things in the deck as well? So a lot of the bodies are going to focus on some undead stuff, value, giving you corpses, and then a little bit of magnetic, in addition to those couple of death rattles. So the magnetic stuff, we have Amalgams of the Deep, just for maybe another mech if you're not drawing the naval mines, so that you can use magnetic to attach to a body if you want, but also the Amalgam works as an undead. So Amalgam, fantastic. Plus you can, just keep value going and get more bodies for those corpses. Then the Bronze Gatekeepers, I put 2 of these in here because I thought maybe attaching these to the Naval Mine also kind of forces your opponent to clear the naval mines because this has taunt on it. As well as Ziliax. I love Ziliax so much. So Ziliax just attaching to a naval mine, you get to rush, you get some lifesteal, and it has the taunt. So again, your opponent is forced to kill it. Or you can use things like the Construct Quarter to kill off your own naval mine for that death rattle as well. So I think there's a lot of synergy here. I, again, wanted to try Mosh Pit. I only put 1 in here. Because it also does spend corpses. It's like spending corpses for this and the Bone Shredders and Marrowgar feels like a lot. So I decided to only do 1 Mosh Pit. And also the giving it Reborn really kind of only feels effective on these death rattle things. So obviously giving Brittleskin Zombie or the Naval Mine themselves a Reborn, or if I can actually get on board and do the Death Growl and, spread those death rattles and then Reborn, cool. But Mosh Pit is another one that, I don't know, we'll see how it ends up going, but maybe it goes, maybe it doesn't. Blightfang is just a fantastic, just solid card, so definitely wanted to throw that in there, and it gives your opponent's things death rattle, not yours, so you don't have to worry about that death rattle, like messing with your synergies. Now, another note when I was building this deck is this is very minion heavy. There's not really any spells. For Unholy Death Knight, there's not honestly a lot of spells. Like Death Growl is in here. And again, maybe I switch out a couple of these cards and play something like the Grave Strength. But a lot of the spells seem to be Frost and Blood. And there's not really quite as many unholy spells that I would want to play. Again, spending corpses to get some 2/2s with Rush, I don't really feel like that's something you want in this deck. So it definitely felt like there was less potential. Like maybe you could do an anti-magic shell, but less potential, I think, for spells in this deck. And then the other tricky thing was also making sure that there's enough draw in the deck, because you want to make sure that you're drawing to these things. If you're trying to go for some of these big combos, you're trying to find the naval mines or the Brittleskin Zombies, you do want some draw, but finding draw that was not a death rattle as well was a little tricky. Chillfallen Baron is a good option, but I didn't want that death rattle for the Bone Shredders specifically. Maybe that ends up getting put in, but I really wanted to limit the death rattles. I really wanted to try some sort of bursty OTK kind of thing. So the death rattles as well, and making sure that I've had draw that wasn't death rattle was also pretty huge. So School Teachers and the Famished Fools are kind of supplemental things there. The School Teachers are just solid on their own. They can find you some things, but I figured maybe School Teacher finding the anti-magic shell, or finding Plague Grain for more corpse generation. Something like that seems pretty decent. And then the Famished Fool, if you're already having some of this low-cost stuff, your hero power, you're using the locations to clear stuff up, you probably can infuse and get some draw from the Famished Fools. So that's kind of where the draw mechanic comes in instead of Death Rattles, because I didn't want to dilute that Death Rattle pool. And now jumping over to our community featured deck. This is submitted by Alucard. Well, thank you so much for the submission. This is a Renathal Triple Blood Death Knight. But the really interesting thing about this is that with Death Knight specifically, this time around, it's still so new that there's no rotation happening for the cards for Death Knight. So the fact that Alucard took one of these, Alu took this deck and kind of made it feel a little different, I was really intrigued with. So I wanted to look at this. Again, as I mentioned, it is a Renathal list. But some of my favorite inclusions are some of these newer cards. Photographer Fizzle being included in here to take a snapshot of your hand, shuffle it into your deck. That gets put in as a singular spell. Basically, you snapshot your hand, and then your hand, the picture of your hand, is a spell that goes into your deck. When you draw the spell, you can then use it and get all of the cards that were photographed, right? So really great tool for like control decks. So I think Photographer Fizzle is an absolute brilliant inclusion in a Triple Blood deck. Really excited for that. But also I'm a huge fan of some of these harmonic spells. So I love seeing this harmonic metal included in here to give minions in your hand effect. Plus, with some of the minions, I mean, harmonic metal, if you can buff something like the Gnome Muncher, that's so much value, so much great healing for something like this blood deck. This is not the kind of deck that I personally like playing, but I can definitely see the synergies, the strategy, and I love that so much. That harmonic spell in here is going to be absolutely brutal. Of course, some of the kind of already included cards, Soul Stealer, Patchwork, Mograine, Sylvanas, the Gnome Munchers, your removal tools, Corpse Explosion, Blood Boil. Gotta have School Teacher. School Teacher is such a solid card. Things like the Death Strike, still all included, but also include some of the new cards like Screaming Banshee with the Lifesteal, and then after your hero gains health, summon a soul with that much attack and health. That could be pretty spicy in here too. I like this one. Very curious to see how much that this will generate, because honestly, if this Banshee can stick on the board, you get to attack with it. That's already 3. So that would summon a 3/3 soul. Then if you play a spell while this is on board, you get another one. This could create an entire board all on its own, depending on when this comes down and what other things are used with it. This coming down when the opponent has some minions on board and you've played Corpse Explosion, just Screaming Banshee and then fill the board with like some 2/2s. I don't know. If that triggers each time, you'd fill the board. If it only triggers once based on all of the things, you're getting a huge minion. Whichever way that works, that feels really good. And that might be a way to create some boards that Blood DK didn't have before. I also really like this cover artist inclusion. Cover artist transforming to a 3/3 copy of a minion? I thought before that maybe this was a very niche card, but I kind of like this in this Blood DK. And honestly, this is a battle cry and not its own death rattle. I could honestly include cover artist in that deck that I just theory crafted for my Deathrattle Unholy DK. Could be a very good inclusion. I'm really intrigued with that cover artist effect. And then, of course, you have all of these similar cards that Blood DK has already been using. Then it adds in this Audio Medic. I like this as well. This Rush, and if it's a finale, you gain the Lifesteal. So definitely as the Blood DK, you're going to want to be playing this with that finale effect. But also, if this gets buffed with the Harmonic Metal, then you get Lifesteal on it. That just seems so good. I really like some of these inclusions here, some of these additional cards. I think that this version of Blood DK seems definitely like something that could be very, very solid. I was not expecting a deck like this to see so many different cards being added in for a Theorycraft. I thought, well, Blood DK has already felt really good, right? It's been a thing. No cards are leaving. It probably doesn't really want to include anything, but I think Alu has proven that some of these cards probably will be included, and it will potentially make the deck a little bit frustrating for some players, but this definitely looks like a solid control deck. So thank you so much for this submission. I cannot wait. And thank you for checking this video out. I will have the links and deck codes for these down in the description below so that when the expansion launches on April 11th, if you want to try these out, you can get those codes below and try them. But what do you think of these decks? What other Death Knight decks are you excited for? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for checking this out. And if you haven't already, go ahead and check this playlist out where I went through all of the new Festival of Legend cards and did a full review. So check that out, and I'll see you in the next one.